So these are the sort of the key elements of what you would think of through a zero trust architecture. And what I want to go through next is really highlighting, what we do for each of these. Okay, so when you think about least privilege access, again, granting only the minimum permissions for the shortest duration necessary, a number of our products help employ a least privilege model. And I think that's a very key thing for us to recognize, that it's not just one product, it's many products working in concert. So when you think about this from a perspective of what identity governance can do, well, identity governance can first off help ensure that we're reviewing the right entitlements and helping narrow down what kind of entitlements am I going to issue, what type of entitlements am I going to grant, making sure I've got the right level of granularity and putting that in front of the right business level decision maker. It also helps them decide on what appropriate access should be. So that's always a question that should be in the back of one's mind when you're going through and doing identity governance, is you're really there to, and participating in that process to determine what appropriate access looks like. And so in the case of least privilege, making sure that appropriate access is of just what this person needs to do to perform that function, and following the least privilege principles. It also helps manage access requests. So the whole process of, okay, I've given you only enough entitlement for you to perform your day-to-day job functions, but there might be times where you need something more. So I have a process where you can make a request, it can be reviewed, it can be approved, and then when you no longer need it, it can be revoked. Identity Manager also helps in this process. And as you know, Identity Manager helps manage the identity lifecycle. But this is also through the automated issuance of entitlements as well as the revocation of entitlements. So based off of the current state and the current information that we have about the identity, we can ensure that the right entitlements are being set and that we're enforcing the decisions from the identity governance process, as well as automating the revocation of entitlements when appropriate. So instead of letting individuals accrue entitlements over time, making sure that if their state changes, that we can make sure that anything that they used to have access to that they don't need to have access to any longer can be revoked. Access management, this is the point of where we're actually enforcing entitlements. So a lot of times when we're setting entitlements, it might be for the applications themselves, and the applications are providing enforcement. But access management actually provides additional authorization steps that can even group and or provide front-end authorization to those applications before you get to the application level enforcement. So being able to understand what the risk is and how this ties back to whether you need it or not, and whether the right conditions are available, we can also restrict whether we can even see the application you're trying to get to. And then, of course, privileged account manager is also very important with regard to this, because when we use PAM, we're actually segregating higher privileged operations from day-to-day operations. And we're making sure that we have tighter control over those sensitive privileged operations. So we're forcing you to go through a checkout of a privileged account, for example. And when you do that, we actually turn on the big bright spotlights and watch everything that you do for the duration of that session. So making sure that you don't abuse that elevated privilege, and that we can track to see what you've done. And we can also further limit what you can do with that privilege. And it provides overall better inspection over any of these kinds of administrative functions that if an attacker got access to, could do a lot of damage. From a microsegmentation standpoint, a lot of these products play a similar role again. So this whole view of this from an identity governance perspective is we're restricting what kind of access you can have within each security zone. So in the process of deciding what access is appropriate, we can look at this and recognize which entitlements are being issued for which security zones. So we can break it down and limit access even further. Also, same thing is that using access requests to identify when people need to across security zones and making sure that that's handled in an appropriate way and tracked and documented. Identity Manager performs, again, from a perspective of automation, managing those entitlements in each of the security zones that are defined and making sure that they're maintained and kept current. Advanced Authentication plays a role in verifying the identity as we cross these boundaries. And Access Management, again, is performing that front-end authorization, enforcing whether or not you can even get to a particular security zone. And as I mentioned earlier, Privileged Account Manager can segregate those privileged operations away from the day-to-day operations, which is itself an act of microsegmentation. And then, of course, this view of multi-factor authentication, that's clearly our advanced authentication offering, providing that verification of identity for each security zone, providing greater assurance of the identity, and also taking into account current state and providing that risk-based step up. So if there's any conditions that might make this suspect, we can always increase the level of assurance by asking for additional factors. And as I was bringing up the view of API control and monitoring, again, making sure that we're controlling this at the programmatic level, our Secure API Manager helps us with this. So we can create, manage, secure, and measure the APIs that an organization uses. This allows us to provide finer-grained authorization for microservices, segment and throttle traffic between security zones. Also, we have additional benefits like limit the potential for denial of service attacks, as well as providing the analytics around the API usage to track what's going on, whether how you align with compliance as well as licensing. So again, this from this perspective of Secure API Manager, really helping cover anything that would involve programmatic access as organizations decompose these different functions into smaller microservices. And to be adaptive, really taking in the context and providing that continuous evaluation of risk, we provide our risk service. So this is really helping extend the monitoring and control throughout the session, detecting when risk levels have changed. So if the risk level changes for whatever reason during the session, we can trigger automatic remediation, and also tuning the authorization levels based off of current context and identified risks. Okay, so this gives us that view of constantly recognizing what's going on and being able to respond to it. And then this also leverages Interset, which provides us that additional insight from the unsupervised machine learning and behavioral analytics. So we provide information to Interset, Interset turns back and provides information back to us. So that way we can have a better understanding of what's going on to provide continuous authentication and continuous authorization. So you can see that, to really engage in these kinds of zero trust initiatives, it takes a number of our products, but we have all these products. These are clearly part of our portfolio. We have a good way to be able to respond to organizations' needs around zero trust. But, again, zero trust isn't a silver bullet, so the best thing to really do and where are the gaps? So what are the most important gaps that you can fill, that you need to fill right now? Most organizations that are going down this path of zero trust, that they're all really taking this seriously, but it's not something that you just drop kick and do all at once. And so many times they might be tackling aspects of what zero trust requires, but not everything. And so having the fact that understanding where they have need and looking for the white space even through their zero trust initiative is very important. And we can, because we have the breadth, we can help fill those gaps.